Demeco Ryans has the nostalgia, was a former captain, one of the better linebackers in franchise history, one of the better players in franchise history. There's a lot of positive that comes with Demeco Ryans. And look, I mean, he's coach. That's not the only reason he's being hired. He's one of the best candidates in the coaching carousel. He's the defensive coordinator for the number one defense in the entire NFL, a team that just lost in the NFC Championship game. So Demeco's also warranted for the job. It's not just because he's a former player. The biggest positive for me, though, Blankers, comes from like the symbol of hope more than anything else. Because we've looked at this Houston Texans franchise for about the last 3 seasons or so, thinking that it was a debacle. Sean Payton this season calling it a dysfunctional organization. If you believe Colin Cowherd after a 5-hour dinner, I do. The Jack Easterby stuff. There's been a lot of stuff, a lot of negative stuff that made the Texans fan base lose hope. We saw it in season tickets. We saw it with the tailgating scene. We saw it with the just apathy between the city as well. We even heard Demeco Ryans. Aaron Wilson reported it at the start of the whole coaching carousel that Demeco Ryans is not going to be interested in the Houston Texans job. People were wondering because of the lawsuit, would Demeco Ryans even be interested in the Houston Texans job? And here you have it where it seems that we're on the eve of Demeco Ryans choosing the Houston Texans to be the place that he wants his first head coaching opportunity to be, despite all the other noise, despite the Easterby, despite the Sean Payton, despite people even telling him, are you sure you want to go to Houston? So if Demeco Ryans is buying in, I think it's time for the Texans fan base to give a little bit of buy-in and maybe the benefit of the doubt that they are turning the corner from being a dysfunctional organization.
Well, and I think that, to kind of just piggyback on that, but to give you the real basics of the matter is a year ago, we remember there were guys that were literally turning the team away, that were saying, you know what, this might be my only opportunity, or I might only get one opportunity. It's not going to be this one. I don't like anything about it. It just seems to be a very toxic situation that I want to stay away from. The fact that Demeco's easily the hottest name on the market right now, because Sean Payton has kind of faded into the background. And that he's not only not turning you away, but he's turning others away, seemingly, so that he can make sure that he's identified you as the place he wants to be. Now, it helps he used to play here. He knows the city. His family is comfortable here. And those are kind of things that help. But that doesn't matter at the end of the day when you get your first chance to be a head coach and you don't know if the second one's coming. You got to make sure you get the right one the first time around. And you're still confident that this is the right spot for you. That's a really good sign if you're the organization. That's a great sign if you're a fan. Now, I don't know how that's going to translate to the team yet because I obviously have my own personal opinions on the coaching staff and what it means with a franchise quarterback. But from the standpoint of Demeco and the Texans and Demeco, it seems like the marriage is getting close to being consummated and everybody's going to be happy. And it seems like from an imaging standpoint, while we've seen this organization be so hyper-focused this offseason on reconstructing their image, it seems like this is exactly what they wanted and they're going to get it.
Yeah, they are going to get it. Look, I'm not going to sit here and say that this is a lock and it's a guarantee. There's no coaching hire that's a lock and a guarantee, and you need a combination of things to go right. You need a good leader in place as the head coach. You need a general manager that's good at building a roster. I mean, one of the biggest reasons that Demeco Ryans had a ton of success in San Francisco is because that roster is loaded. Quite honestly, he inherited a defense that was already top 5 in the NFL. Already had players there. He's not going to have that same luxury in Houston. So it takes a combination of having a good head coach. It takes a combination of a head coach that's able to hire good coaches around him and smart people around him. It takes the general manager to build a team and to build a talented team. And it also requires ownership to be willing to do the things necessary in order to build a winning organization. And what we know so far from Cool Cat Cal McNair is that he's willing to at least spend money. Now, can he hire good people and then get out of the way and not be fooled by Jack Easterby's of the world? I think time will tell. We can't just all of a sudden just forgive all of the evil that Cal McNair has done to this organization. But it is a sign that with the hiring of Demeco and the positivity that hiring is going to receive in the city of Houston, that perhaps they're turning the page. Perhaps that's chapter 1 in Cal McNair's guidance as the leader of this organization. Don't say owner. We'll get in trouble if we say owner. But with his guidance as the owner. Maybe that chapter 1 was, learning the ropes. Had a lot of lessons to learn. Maybe chapter 2 is Demeco and they can have a winning organization for the next decade. We don't know. It's going to either work or it's not going to work. But right now, the hiring of Demeco is getting a lot of people back on board. Where people are saying, look, if Demeco Ryans is willing to do business with the Houston Texans, maybe we have to take him seriously.
No, and I think that's the main thing for everybody is because it does. That's the one big translation as it relates to football. because we'll see with the draft picks and a quarterback and everything else down the road. But right away, the first thing that it says is it sends a message to free agents around the league that, hey, maybe it's okay to consider the Texans again. If I'm a defensive player, why wouldn't I want to play for a guy like Demeco Ryans? If I'm a free agent and I realize if Demeco Ryans is willing to sign on the dotted line and say, I'm committed because the timing is right now, the place is okay now, the dust is settled, the bat is out, and it's ready to be good, then that sends a message across free agency and veterans and in a lot of locker rooms where guys are going to be coming up on their years to choose where they want to play and go, okay, well, Texans are back on my list again, because with Demeco there, building a positive culture and a winning culture, I can do that.
Yeah, I think that those are the benefits that come with Demeco Ryans before you even look at the football prowess stuff. The other stuff is like, okay, 2 years ago they hired David Culley. Why? What in the world is this hire? I've never heard of a David Culley before. And then last year they hired Lovie Smith after it looked like they were going to move in a different direction. The Sunday supper leading to the hiring of Lovie Smith, and then they fire him after a year. So one-and-done head coach. The Easterby factor, Deshaun Watson demanding a trade before we found out he was a sexual pervert. The whole the Hopkins mess. The Bill O'Brien mess. The first chapter for Cal McNair's regime, not good. This is a symbol that perhaps they are turning the page. It's not to guarantee that it's going to work. And then on the football side of things, you're getting a candidate that a lot of people have wanted the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. A lot of people wanted him last year. He said he wasn't ready, or at least the situation wasn't right. Multiple teams wanted him this year. He didn't even interview with half of them because apparently he met with the Texans and had such a long interview that he canceled those and never rescheduled them, which is a positive sign as well. So you have a serious coach, a serious candidate, not a David Culley, not a Lovie Smith. And I think that much like Sean Payton would have, where like Sean Payton immediately brings legitimacy to the organization, it's the same thing with Demeco Ryans bringing that, makes you feel legit as an NFL organization.
When was it Rappaport last week was the first one that said that he was emerging to be the finalist for the Texans?
He said his exact wording was Texans top candidate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so he says that. Uh-huh. Then you got the guy in Denver that one day says it's going to be somebody else.
Benjamin Albright the day before.
Yeah, and then comes back and says, wait a minute, and walks it back.
That was the tell for me.
But which, again, for me too, was kind of like the final validation. But now, until Schefter says something, it's not official. But when Schefter comes out yesterday with basically the same information that we heard on Tuesday, now everybody's like, oh, he's going to the Texans?
More clues, though. More clues. Because Jonathan Gannon, after the game, they had him for like a quick little, hey, you won the Super Bowl. What are you going to do next? He didn't say, I'm not going to Disney World. He said he's not going to Houston. He said, I'm going to be back in Philly. I'm going to be the defensive coordinator back in Philly. Here was Fred Warner after the game yesterday in which they lost to San Francisco. And listen to him talk about Demeco.
I hadn't thought about it up to this point because obviously you think you're gonna win it all, but seeing him was emotional. It was the first time it kind of hit me, right, that this was the last one with him, and we came in this thing together.
I'm not gonna use Shanahan.
I owe everything to him. He's the reason I'm the player I am today. He's fully deserving to go on and be a head coach. So. No, yeah, it hit hard today, for sure.
They're saying their goodbyes in the locker room after the game. Demeco Ryans is leaving San Francisco. He canceled interviews with 2 other teams. He's telling Denver he's not interested. They're moving on to Jim Harbaugh again. He's flying to Houston today. Demeco Ryans is your next Houston Texans head coach.
Yeah, look, and whether it's the Texans or not, I mean, the players in the locker room are savvy enough to realize if the dude is one of the top coaching candidates in every job that's open, he's probably not going to be here next year. But when you hear, again, when Schefter speaks, the whole league suddenly listens, and it suddenly validates what we've heard for multiple days prior to that. But regardless, if I'm playing for Demeco Ryans, I realize I'm going to be playing for somebody else next year if I have a contract with the Niners, because amongst all the teams interested, one of them is going to give him the job, if not more. He's going to take one of them and be going somewhere else. So you do have to kind of be a little sentimental and say, look, I mean, you talk about things that validate. That's a great validating quote right there to say from a defensive player's position that wasn't Bosa, but is a hell of a player, to say that I wouldn't be the player that I am without him.
Yeah.
That's impactful.
Yeah, because it's very easy for a player. Like, you're not going to say anything negative to a guy, But you could just give the cliche of, oh yeah, I meant, he meant a lot to me. But to
Or
go
us,
in specific,
right?
yeah.
He could spin it more generalized, like
Sure.
he's meant a lot to us. After taking over for Saleh, we didn't miss a beat, and he was able to keep us on the right, frame of mind week to week.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, for him to single him out and say, I wouldn't be the player I am without him,
Exactly.
that says a whole lot more.
Like if I were to leave the station for whatever reason, and people were like, or you were leaving the station, and people were asking me, how about, Blankers leaving the show? A lot of people think we don't like each other. We'd be like, yeah, I mean a lot for the station. Like, there
Right.
you go. Like,
Right.
you just give kind of a cliche. You're not going to say anything negative, but you're not really going into specifics. You're giving a very surface level. See you later. But this is not the case with Fred Warner. He's leaving San Francisco. He's going to be the next head coach of the Texans. Is this a symbol of hope? Because I think it is. I think it's a symbol of hope that the Texans are starting to figure it out. Now, not to say the Texans are going to win more than 4 games next year, because they still have a roster that needs work. They still, have a lack of talent on this team. They have a lot of work going forward. It's not going to be a quick fix overnight. Demeco comes in, everybody's happy, and then the Texans win 9 or 10 games next year, and then they're in the playoffs. It's still very much part of a rebuild, and maybe Demeco will use that word where Nick Caserio did not. 713-780-ESPN, 713-780-3776. Also, what are your biggest fears, concerns with Demeco Ryans as the head coach? Kloppa says the one that everybody wants to talk about, right? It's the offensive coordinator. What does Demeco Ryans do with the offensive coordinator position? Because that's the biggest concern if you hire a defensive-minded guy. It's okay, well, who's going to lead the offense? Who's going to potentially develop a quarterback? Should you go the quarterback route? That, to me, is the biggest thing that Demeco Ryans is going to have to do. That's the next big hurdle of this whole offseason, is who is that offensive coordinator. And there are certain names that I like that are connected with Demeco Ryans, and then there's certain names that I don't like that are connected with Demeco Ryans.
So I'm with you. And again, it was interesting because we see after the conference championship games, a lot of things start to take shape. We see guys saying that they're pulling out. We see guys that then get focused on being, interviewing for the second time. We see organizations making decisions. We see other teams firing coaches, and it all kind of lets the dominoes start to fall. And when you look at it, I was looking at it last night and again this morning and just thinking about, well, all of a sudden the Cowboys fire Kellen Moore. Mm-hmm. You already have Byron Leftwich out there. You have guys that are Eric Bieniemy now, it is said by multiple reports, would be open to a lateral move if it meant, that he could spread his wings a little bit more and also probably get out from under the umbrella, which kind of hinders him, of Andy Reid. And I thought, well, what if Demeco got one of those guys? Mm-hmm. Is that going to help or hurt? Because the thing is, again, much like why I'm against a defensive coach getting the head job is because if an offensive coordinator kicks ass in 1 year's time like Benny Johnson, next thing you know, he's going to be the highly sought-after offensive coordinator that everybody hires in a year's time, and it hurts your quarterback. You get a guy that has more experience, but unless he's really comfortable in the city and the environment, and maybe he just doesn't like all the extra stuff that goes with being the CEO and the head coach,
right,
you're going to lose him probably quicker.
I like the idea of stopgap OC, because it means if you have a dude that's here for 2 years and he's such a hot shot, it means you're really good offensively for 2 years. So I prefer that route more than like the veteran that's going to be here for a decade and you're always mediocre. That said, it is challenging because you have to find that guy every other year.
Here's the other thing too, Jeremy. Then you also hope that the next guy in line, normally your quarterback coach, is a guy that can carry the torch if he does get another job. Like the same way he's grooming your quarterback, he's also working and grooming his quarterback's coach to be the next OC, like Pep, only more talented in terms of play calling. But, if you come in and say you're Bieniemy or Leftwich or whoever, you come in and you bring your quarterback coach with you, and they basically have conversations that said, if I get offered another job, you're either going to be my OC or you're going to be falling in line to take the OC from me here. So be on your P's and Q's, and let's work together so that it works for both of us.
I always have that plus 350 ticket that Demeco Ryans is going to be the next head coach of the Texans, so pretty pleased about that.
Oh, that's nice.
Pretty pleased about that point.